But thank y'all so much again for coming here this evening to talk about estate planning. I know that it's not something that everybody is just jumping to talk about, but it's one of those things that I think more and more of us are realizing how important it is. It's one of those things that back in the day, a lot of families did not really experience the negative sides of not having an estate plan, because things were a lot different back in the day. When people lived in a place, they grew up in a place, they usually stayed in that place. That's where, like, when as an attorney, I look at a lot of the family trees and histories of land for the clients I work with, and I'll see how interesting it is that 2 or 3 generations ago, people were born in the same town and they died. It's the same town that they died in. But these days, people are moving away. People are getting homes of their own. The families back in the day were so big. So now, a few generations later, one family is huge. And so that's when we're seeing a lot of issues with estate planning coming up, where people have died without wills, died without trust, and their property got to their children and grandchildren in a way that's really hard to manage, because grandma died in 2000, and now at this point, some of her children have died, some of her grandchildren have died. And I don't know if y'all want to just say in the chat if you have been in that situation, or someone in a situation where that this is grandma's house, but everybody see it as the family house and nobody really has ownership. The ownership's not really clear with the house. I don't know if y'all have seen that, but it's becoming very common. Another thing I think about is that owning a home was not something that every family did back in the day, or even every Black family. More and more people are doing things like owning homes, having significant assets. And so not having an estate plan makes a lot more of an impact than it did in the past. So that's why I love having these conversations, because so many people don't think about estate planning, or they don't want to think about it. But it's so important that we do, because if we want to create wealth during our lifetimes and pass that wealth to the next generation, the only way we can do that clearly is with an estate plan. So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about estate planning reimagined. I'm about to share my screen and we'll get into a few slides. And at the end, we'll have some time to ask questions. I'll answer questions. I know some people already submitted questions, so we'll answer the questions that have already been submitted. But throughout the conversation, if you have a question, if you want to just put it in the chat, then that's the way we can do it as well. So let's talk about estate planning reimagined. We're not going to think about it as something sad or boring. We're going to think about it as something exciting. But first, I don't think I introduced myself. I am Veronica McClendon, and I am the CEO and the managing attorney of McClendon Law and Consulting. You can see my little shirt here. Yep, right there. I really proud to wear my little shirts, because I go out, and I shouldn't call them little, but I'm really proud to wear my shirt and go out and just spread the word about estate planning and about McClendon Law and Consulting. We're located in Macon, Georgia. And we provide heirs property, estate planning, and probate legal services to help farmers, landowners, and other legacy-driven individuals build wealth, increase their income, and secure their legacies. And I need to update this slide and put business owners as well, because we do help a lot of business owners with their planning, either on a business level or with their personal planning, to make sure that their business continues after they've gone on, or after they retire. I always like to point that out, that it's not always about when I die, this is what I want to happen. Some of it is when I'm old enough to where I don't want to have to deal with all this stuff. Do I have a plan in place? I talk to a lot of people who retire, they're in their older years, and they didn't put a lot of time and energy into planning for their future. And so now, as they're older and they're getting to a place where they're less able to handle their own affairs, then they're relying on other people who are doing things differently than they would have wanted it done. And so estate planning is thinking about that as well. So the first question is, what is an estate plan? But before we can talk about an estate plan, we have to know what is an estate. An estate is everything, all the money, the property, even some of rights and contracts, like things that you're entitled to during your lifetime. It's all of that stuff that a person owns at the time of their death. And so an estate plan is their written instructions for how their money and property will be distributed after they die, caring and providing for their minor children and other individuals, or even business that they have, like their own business or other responsibilities they have, making sure that there's a plan in place for that. Making medical and healthcare and financial decisions for the person while they're still alive, but unable to handle their own affairs. So estate planning involves passing on your personal assets, planning in the event of your incapacity, providing for your loved ones who depend on you, even if you're not able to directly provide for them, and then planning for long-term care. If you are a landowner or a business owner, you might need a little bit more as well. You need to pass on those business assets. This is what your business owns. You might do this through a succession plan. It's also passing on the business operation, which is how it runs, and passing on the know-how, those trade secrets, those processes and procedures. This is how we do things around here with this business or with this farm. Making sure that you have those things documented, because you don't want to leave it up to chance that the right person is just going to automatically come into place and keep your business going. So now we're going to talk about some of the components of estate plan and what different things might go into an estate plan. Because I hear a lot of people say, well, what's an estate plan? Do I have an estate? Only rich people have estates, right? Or is an estate plan the same thing as a will or a trust? I get those questions a lot. And so as you all heard me just say, estate planning is all of that stuff. It's thinking about, do I need a will or a trust? And just passing on my assets to the next generation. It's the whole process of creating your plan. So the different things you might see in an estate plan, there might be other parts as well. Another thing to think about is that you may not have all of these things in your estate plan, but some of the major components that you will see are a will, trust. You may have one or more trusts depending on how your assets are set up. You might have a business entity as part of your estate plan. Advance directive for healthcare, financial power of attorney, life insurance and other benefits, and then making funeral arrangements. All of those things can be part of your estate plan. And again, y'all fire up the chat. Anything that you want to share or ask in the chat, or just say you hear and you're paying attention, I love to hear from you and respond to those things. I have here, I forgot to update this slide, but I have a will. Most landowners will need a will, but this is general for everybody. Most people will need some kind of a will. And we'll talk about why in just a minute. First, we want to know, what does a will allow you to do? It allows you to distribute your assets. So like I said before, an estate is everything that a person owns at the time of their death. So with the will, they get to say, I want this to go to this person. I want this to go to that person. I want them to get this much, them to get that much. You also get to nominate an executor, and that's the person who's going to be in charge of your estate. You get to say who makes all the decisions that are not made in your actual documents. The decisions that you didn't make in advance, you get to choose who makes those decisions for you. You get to fund a trust if you have some trust. Like, for example, if you want to leave property to minor children, when you're doing your planning, the people that you want to leave things to are minors, you can create a trust for them. But you don't know if they're going to still be minors when you pass away. So what you do is what's called a testamentary trust, and that will be written into your will. And you can say, after I pass away, if I leave anything to someone who's still under a certain age, I want it to go into a trust. But then at the same time, if you pass away and those people are above age and they're no longer minors, then they will get their property outright. So it gives you a little flexibility to plan for circumstances that you're not aware of. Another situation might be if you have someone who has special needs or even may have special needs in the future. And I say that to say that we don't know where we will be in the future. People are, considered healthy and they don't have any kind of disability or anything that limits their ability to manage their assets, or they don't have any kind of incapacity. But then at the time of someone's death, they could have developed an illness or some kind of a disability that makes them unable to receive property in their own name. And so in that case, you can say, if at the time of my death, any of these people that I wanted to leave something to has a disability or receives government benefits in a way that they would be disqualified if I leave them something, I'll put theirs into a trust. And again, it's a way for you to create a plan now that anticipates that things might change in the future. You also get to nominate a guardian and trustee for your minor children, or even if you have a family member who depends on you, who's not a minor, but they have a disability and they're not able to care for themselves or make decisions for themselves. If you are responsible for that person, you can put in your estate plan, put in your will, if anything happened to me, make sure you take care of my sister. And this is the person that I nominate to take care of my sister if I'm not able to do that. And then finally, you can give to charity. A lot of people like to give to their alma mater. They like to give to their favorite nonprofit, perhaps their church. You can do that through your will. And so here we'll talk about what's required to execute a will. And I go through all of this because I have done the other end where, as an attorney, someone will come to me and say, my loved one has died. Here's their will. And I look at it and I say, this wasn't done correctly. So now we have some work to do. Or there might be one or two things missing that a lot of times if people are doing their wills on their own, they don't know all of these requirements. So I don't give this to you to create your own will. I don't necessarily recommend that. But if for some reason somebody decided I'm not going to work with Veronica, I'm not working with this other attorney, here are some things that they want to make sure are done with their will. You have to be over the age of 14. That's not usually too hard these days. But back in the day, 14-year-olds were considered men sometimes. And so they had business and things that they were taking care of. You must be of sound mind. So that means you must know what you own. You must be in full control of your thought process. You can't be at a place where you can't make decisions on your own and you depend on other people to make decisions for you. You can't be under pressure or undue influence. And your will has to be signed in the presence of two witnesses. And those witnesses, like I said, they have to be there. You can't get your will, sign it in your bedroom, then take it to somebody in the kitchen and let them sign it, then take it to your neighbor next door and let them sign it. Everybody has to be in the same place. And then if all of those things have happened, you can have a notary to sign a self-proven affidavit. And the self-proven affidavit is a document that says we promise that everything was done exactly how it was supposed to be done. The person who was creating the will, nobody had a gun to their head or was like nudging them the whole time saying, you better get this done. Everybody is saying that it was done willfully as far as they can tell. And then for the most part, this should allow the will to be probated in probate court. It's not always guaranteed, but those are the basic requirements. So we talked about a will, and now we'll talk about a trust. And I say some estate plans should include one or more trusts. And these days, I encourage trust more and more. A lot of people would come to me back in the day and they'll say, Veronica, I want a trust. And I say, I don't know, people don't really do trust like that, or I don't think you really need a trust. And I don't know if I was just in a different world back then or if it just suddenly became a thing. But now we typically recommend trust. And there are a lot of reasons for that. One reason is because if you put your property into the trust and you do it properly, then if you ever became incapacitated, then you will have somebody who can step right in as your successor trustee and take control of your assets and make sure everything is cared for just as you would have done. They can make sure your financial needs are met and that your bills and all those things are taken care of. If you have property, they can sign off on things and just manage your property just like you would as an individual. Another reason why trusts are good and why people like them is because they want to avoid probate. They don't want to have to put their they don't want to have their family members to put their will on the public record, which is what happens when you go through probate. They might be leaving something to a relative that has some debt, and they don't want all of that person's creditors knowing, like, oh, you left Susie $10,000, huh? Well, Susie, we're here to get our bills paid. So you might have a trust for privacy purposes. And if you go through probate with the will, then it's all out there. But with the trust, then you can have it private. It's not something that has to go on a public record. It's something that's done with your trustee and the beneficiaries, who are the people who receive from you. And we'll talk a little bit more about some other reasons, but we're going to go into this to talk a little bit more about what is a trust. So a trust is a legal arrangement in which one party takes responsibility for the property or money of another person, and they manage it for the benefit of one or more parties. And we'll have I think I have a little illustration on the next slide. There are many different types of trusts. There are revocable trusts, irrevocable trusts. Those are like the two main categories. You also have special needs trust, which will be created for someone who has a disability and you want to protect whatever you leave to them from disqualifying them from public benefits. You can have charitable trusts, which allow you to donate to a charity, but it also gives you a source of income that's protected from creditors and other folks who might want to get your money. Trust can be a little bit pricey to manage when we get into like some of the charitable trusts and things like that. So it's something that's usually used when someone is like a high net worth person. And then also, it's in terms of trust, you can do one inter vivos, which means that it's created while you're living. So that might be a trust, a revocable trust that you create as the foundation of your estate plan. That's an inter vivos trust. But then you can also have the testamentary trust, which is what I described earlier. You have a will, you leave something to somebody in your will, but just in case they are not able to receive that property, they might be a minor or they might have a disability, then that testamentary trust is there to be able to hold their property if you are not able, if they're not able to manage it on their own. And so here we'll talk about how a trust works. You have your trust property, which, as I mentioned, it can be money, it can be real estate, it can be pretty much anything that can be considered property. You get that property, the person who owns it, they get that and they retitle it into the name of their trustee. So basically, if you have a house, I'm Veronica McClendon, and it might be the house that Veronica McClendon owns. If I want to put it into a trust, I'll write a deed from Veronica McClendon to John Doe, the trustee of the Veronica McClendon Trust. So that will be retitling the asset. If it's money, you would change the owner of the bank account from your name to the name of your trustee. So you take your property, you change the ownership to the name of the trustee, and you'll say, I give this to John Doe, as I mentioned, trustee of the Veronica McClendon Trust. Then you've created a trust. Now, the thing is, you need to have an agreement with it, a trust agreement with it, to show how that trust works, what the different rules are, what powers your trustee has, who you want to receive the property. You have to put that into a written document. But as long as you change the ownership from your name to somebody else's name as the trustee of your trust, you've created a trust. And as I mentioned, it's someone who owns the property. They put it into the hands of a trustee, and that trustee's job is to make sure that that property is available for the beneficiaries. So when we get done with this, if you have questions about that, then we can have those. And I don't know why this is coming up again. Oh, look at me making a little checklist. Okay, I forgot about that one. So we talked about a will, we talked about a trust, business entities. You can have LLCs, healthcare directive. I changed this thing up so much, I can't remember what's next. So what I'm gonna do is just talk a little bit about each of these that I'm putting up on the screen. So a business entity, an LLC. sometimes, especially with real estate or with the business, then the owner will put it into an LLC so that the business or the real estate is no longer in the owner's name. It's in the LLC's name. And that creates some liability protection. It separates the assets from you personally, so that if, let's say that you have a farm and a cow kicks somebody in the face and they want to sue the farm, then they can't get at your personal pockets. As long as you have done everything carefully and been very careful about how you use your LLC, then it will protect your personal assets from your business assets. And through that LLC, that separate entity, they might do some estate planning to say, when I'm gone, then this is who I want to own this LLC. So I'm the 100% owner now, but when I die, it's going to be 33% to this child, 33% to that child, and 33% to the other child. So you can put those terms in your LLC so that it's handled on that separate kind of ownership structure. And that could be for real estate or business. As I mentioned, you might own a grocery store. You own it as you're the only person who owns this LLC that owns this grocery store. When you die, now your 3 children, they become the owners through your LLC. And so then the next thing is an advance directive for healthcare. That's a document where you get to say, if I'm unable to make medical decisions for myself, who will make those decisions for me? And that can be done in a healthcare directive. Financial power of attorney is similar. If I'm ever in a place where I can't make my own financial decisions, then I name a financial power of attorney to make decisions on my behalf. And those, when you have that document in place, they can make legal decisions for you as if they were you. And then life insurance, other benefits, we know what those are. But when you're doing your estate planning, you want to just double check to make sure that your beneficiary designations are up to date, because you don't want to have someone listed as a beneficiary who has already passed away, or perhaps you realize that you don't want to leave this person $100,000 because they ain't been acting right. And if I leave them $100,000 in their pocket, then it's going to be gone the day after I leave it to them. Or you might say, I went to Veronica's workshop and I learned that I don't have to just give them $100,000 to themselves. I can put it into a trust. And then when I'm gone, they'll get in a trust, and that trustee will give them a little bit of the money at a time. So those are all the things that we do in estate planning to make sure that we have everything covered in a comprehensive way. Then making funeral arrangements is part of that as well. Some people like to prepay their funeral arrangements so that when their family has to handle those things, they just go to the funeral home and say, I'm here for the John Doe funeral. I need you to go ahead and just do everything that he said that he wanted you to do. And I know that with my mother-in-law, she did that when her mother passed. They were able to just go to the funeral home and everything was taken care of, and she didn't have to make all those decisions. And so that could be part of the estate planning process as well. So I told y'all about estate planning. I think you should do it. I think it's a good idea. But what happens when you die without one? Well, basically, you're leaving everything up to chance and state law, and you're just hoping that everybody's going to do right. And we know that everybody doesn't always do right. People act different when they're grieving. They act different when their parents pass away. They act different when they think somebody trying to get something from them that they're entitled to, or when they don't know what's going on and they see you wrote this check, or what you hiding from us. You know, y'all seen it all. Y'all know what I'm talking about. So if you die without an estate plan, these are like the bare bone things that will happen. I can't tell you that your sister gonna cuss you out and never talk to you again. I don't know if that's gonna happen, but I've seen it happen. I've seen families fight. I've seen people just do all kinds of stuff because someone did not have a clear estate plan, and it just kind of left everybody in limbo. So your possessions are going to be distributed to your heirs at law. That's according to state law. If you have a spouse and children, they will split the property. And it doesn't mean that they're going to split it in a way that makes sense. You got a house, split with spouse and kids. You got a bank account, split with spouse and kids. You got a car, split with spouse and kids. You got a business, which we see a lot. People own a business, they didn't have any kind of estate planning, and now all of their family comes in as the owners, and it's just a big mess. So the state law is going to kick in and decide who inherits your property. A judge is going to decide who takes custody of your minor children, if you have any. A judge is going to decide who's going to administer your estate. You don't get to choose your executor. The judge is going to decide who gets to do that job. And the judge is going to appoint someone to manage any assets or money that your children inherit from you. And all of these things, unless when it's time to administer the estate, the family does things in a way that they're all in agreement. A lot of times these things cost money because you don't always know who's going to be in your family. You don't know that your brother's baby's mama. I say I'm not going to say that anymore. You didn't know that the mother of your brother's children was going to be part of this process, but because the brother passed before your parents did, then now his mother's children, the mother of his children is saying, this is how I want things done as it pertains to my kids. And I've seen that happen. I've seen it where you have to open a conservatorship for a child because they inherited $20,000. So now you got to open up a special account and you have to get a person appointed by the court in a whole separate court case from the probate case to be able to manage that child's share of the property. So those are things that cost a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of stress for people who are grieving. So when we die without an estate plan, we really leave our family members in limbo. But when you have a plan, you're in the driver's seat. You decide in advance how things will go. It takes the burden off your family. You get to maximize the value of your assets. People are not having to sell things just to pay for the court costs and pay for the lawyers and pay for this and that. There's already a plan in place for all of that. And then you can leave a legacy that outlives you. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the how. And once again, I think CJ was on here. Oh, no, I got my phone this time. Okay, 7:30. I was going to say CJ was on here last time, and I didn't have any way of keeping time, but I got my phone today. But so how do you create an estate plan? We'll talk a little bit about that. And then once we get through these slides, we're going to have more time for questions. I encourage people when you do your estate planning, let's view it as a gift. You are doing something that's going to bless your family. Leave them better off than they were before. They're losing you, which is the worst thing. But if you can set them up for a better future after you're gone, then at least that's a blessing to them as well. So first, you need to establish your goals. You want to create an inventory of everything that you own. You want to select your fiduciaries and assemble your team of advisors. These are the big components that you'll do as part of your estate planning. And if you put a little thought into this before you hire an attorney, or even after you've hired an attorney, before it's time for them to put the plan in place, it will help the process to go a lot more smoothly. So as far as establishing your goals, you want to begin with the end in mind, like Stephen Covey says. You have a vision. You're like, and a lot of us don't do this, but I encourage you to think, what impact do I want my life to have? I'm doing things every day, going to work, buying groceries, going to school, whatever I'm doing. But what is it all for? Do I have an end game in mind? So you want to cast that vision so you can leave something for your beneficiaries to pick up that torch and leave off and keep where you leave off and keep on running. So you want to think about the who, the what, the when, the how. Who are the people that you want to benefit from this? What do you want them to receive and in what way? And then how you want to accomplish this? When is it going to happen? Is it immediately or is it in the future after a few years after you're gone? You can put all of those things in place with your estate plan. Creating an inventory. That's going to be your real property, cash and bank accounts, investment accounts. If you're a farmer, farm equipment, if you any other kind of business owner. I have a client who has a lawn care business, so he has a nice lawnmower. Need to put that in the estate plan. Vehicles, personal property, business interests. You want to think about all of those things. Heirs property, I didn't put that on the list, but property that you've inherited from an ancestor. Even if you don't have clear ownership of that, you still want to say, in the event that I die before we get this heirs property cleared up, I want my part to go to my middle child. I want my part to go to my first cousin. whatever it is you want to do, you want to put that in your plan so that when someone is actually working through the process of clearing up the heirs property, they know where your part should go. Select your fiduciaries. These are your executors who are in charge of carrying out your wishes in your will, your trustee. You might have several trustees depending on how many trusts are created. You might have those in place. A legal guardian for your minor children, legal guardian or conservator in case you became incapacitated and needed someone to step in to care for you. You get to put that in your plan so that you're not sitting there not able to really care for yourself, and then your worst enemy shows up to come and feed you dinner. You want to be able to put in place, like, this is who I want to care for me if I can't care for myself. And you can even be like, don't send cousin so-and-so because y'all know how she is. You might not put it like that, but you can be very clear about who is and who is not to be involved. And also your agents. If you have a healthcare directive, financial power of attorney, you get to name who is going to be over those, who will be your agents in those situations. You want to assemble your team of advisors. Depending on where you are financially, in terms of your assets, the way your family is set up, you might want to have multiple people on your estate planning team. Because if you have a certain level of wealth built up, you're going to want a financial advisor or a CPA, someone that can help advise on the tax consequences of certain decisions. Because we don't want to just put some documents in place and then later it causes this huge tax issue or whatever there might be. You want somebody who can help advise you. So it might be your attorney, or definitely I encourage you to have an attorney to draft the plan up for you. Financial advisors, insurance agents, land use experts, business consultants. With insurance, sometimes you can be creative with how you set up your estate plan. You may not have enough property, like physical property, to leave to everybody. You might have a house that you leave to your youngest child who doesn't have a house of their own, and then use life insurance to help your other children and feel like they got something as well. When you're selecting an attorney, I hope you'll consider McLennan Long Consulting if you live in the state of Georgia, but I also encourage you to select who makes sense for you. You want to choose someone who can advise you about your personal circumstances. Make sure they can talk to you about retirement benefits. If you know that you have a nice retirement plan from your job, make sure that your attorney can advise you on how to direct those funds in a way that your family can benefit the most from it. Providing for family members with special needs, long-term care planning, making sure that you can afford long-term care like nursing home or in-home care. If you ever needed to do that, you want to make sure that you have the resources, because a lot of people rely on Medicaid to pay for nursing home care or long-term care. But more and more people are starting to know that if you have property at the time of your death, then the state is going to see what they can liquidate and get money to pay them back for everything that they paid through Medicaid to pay for your nursing home care. So for some people, that's the way to go. They don't really have a lot of opportunities to plan in advance. And so when they get to a time where they need care, they just do whatever needs to be done. Also, another situation is that you have to be financially eligible for Medicaid to be able to pay for your care. And so that means you have to make about $2,000 a month or less, and you have to own about $2,000 worth of assets or less. If you have a home that's, of course, going to be worth more than $2,000, that will be protected in the sense of you being eligible for Medicaid. But then after you're gone, the state's going to say, okay, unless certain exemptions apply, we want to sell your house so we can get the money to pay us back. And so you want to think about what's going to be the best strategy. Do I have family who can care for me in the event that I needed extra help at home? Have I saved up money? I talked to some clients the other day who are buying real estate, and they're saying that this real estate is their retirement plan. They're making sure they have money to pay for themselves in their older years, but then also if they ever needed nursing home care or any kind of extended home care, they can pay for that through assets that they own instead of it having to touch their main assets, which would be like the things that are personal and important to them. So whatever you do, it might be insurance. You want to have some kind of plan in place for long-term care. It's something that's we're living longer, and unfortunately, a lot of times we're being sicker, living longer, sicker. Then that comes into play. But another thing that you can do is also be mindful of your health now, so that you be in a better position to take care of yourself when you're older. When you're choosing an attorney, you want to make sure if you own land that you hire someone who understands managing and planning for family land. You don't want somebody who's like, oh, I'm an Atlanta attorney. Most of my clients just have houses and cars and bank accounts. I'm not used to how do we pass on the family farm. Make sure that that person understands that angle of things. Succession planning for a business connected with your land or otherwise. You want to make sure that your attorney can help you to talk through some of those decisions. And when you're choosing your attorney, make sure that you choose someone that you feel comfortable with. You want someone who can relate to you, someone who understands and appreciates your personal and your family and cultural values, because that's not going to be everybody. Everybody's not going to know where you're coming from. And that can play a role. A lot of times I've noticed in terms of when I'm talking to people about how, and I'm generalizing on this, but I'm gonna do it because it's my webinar, but white families versus Black families, the way that they view land, real estate, legacy can often be very different. And so when you're working with an attorney who doesn't understand, if you're Black, they don't know how Black folks view land and view legacy and all of that, they might say, hey, you should just set your plan up this way. But that's not really what you want. And I see that happen a lot on the back end, where clients will come in with this situation that didn't support their family's values. And so I encourage you, not saying that you have to get, if you're Black, you have to get a Black attorney, or if you're white, you have to get a white attorney. Definitely not saying that, but just as an example, again, like I said before, you got a farm down in Upson County or Taylor County, and you going up to Atlanta to get a lawyer to help you plan, and they never even seen like cows in real life. So how they going to help you to think through how to set up your estate? Not saying that it's not possible, but it might be a little harder. So think about someone who can relate to your circumstances, and if you can, find someone who can support your family's values and goals. And you want to be creative in your estate planning. Here's some strategies. I think I probably had land in mind with this slide as well, but some ways to be creative. It doesn't have to be like the wills I used to see a lot back in the day, where I leave everything to my 4 children, share and share alike. It's like, so that's your house, your car, your bank accounts, you just leaving it to them. Share and share alike. So you got your one child who wants to sell the house, one child wants to live in the house, one child wants to rent the house out, and the other child, you can't even get in touch with them to ask them what they want to do with the house. So you want to be creative and think about ways to leave property to your family in a way that's going to actually make sense for them. So you might say, I have this property, like for most people, their most valuable asset is their house. So you can't split a house multiple ways and it makes sense. So you might say, I'm gonna give this to one person, and then the others, I'm gonna give them life insurance, or I'm gonna give them money in my bank accounts, or leave them money from my retirement. You might say, if you have land, you might divide it up and then assign each loved one to a particular tract of land. You actually have your surveyor come out. They create a plat for you. You say parcels 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 goes to this child, 2 goes to that child, 3 goes to that child. If you can do that in advance, it helps, because it's not like, well, I wanted the one by the tree. It's like, you might have wanted it, but mama left you the one by the river, and that's what you're going to get. But if you don't make it clear and you just say, I want them to split the land, then they're fighting over what part everybody gets, and that's not fair, why you get the house, and all of that stuff. You can have options to purchase, and I had land in my, I forgot to update this for general uses, but if there's land involved, you can have options to purchase where you say, hey, I'm leaving everybody their own piece of land. And if one of you wants to farm it, or if you want to rent it out, or whatever you want to do, you can do that, but you need to exercise this option to do so. And you'll have a way of like creating a lease or some kind of an agreement with your siblings so that you can decide, okay, I'm going to be leasing it at this price, or I'm going to buy it from all of you at this price. Those things can be laid out in your estate planning so that your family has some guidance about how they approach things. You might have a trust where you leave everything into a trust and designate a trustee to manage all of the assets. So for example, you might have a real estate portfolio. You have 5 houses that, you have 5 houses that you leave to your children in a trust. And you could say, I want a property manager to be over those 5 houses. Nobody's going to own the house, but everybody will get a check each month to have their portion of the rent paid to them. So you can set things up that way so everybody has an interest in the property, but they're not necessarily in a place where they actually own the property outright. And then if there's real estate, you can say, I want it sold and the money split between my children. And if any of them wants it, they can buy it, but these are the terms under which they buy it. But either way, you want to be creative. There's ways of getting most goals done. And I hope I didn't remove that person. Just gonna double check. So there are some pitfalls that you want to avoid when you're estate planning. You want to avoid unintentionally creating heirs property. And that's that situation that I explained where you say, I'll just leave my house to my 4 kids. Y'all figure it out. That's heirs property because you got all these family members owning one piece of property. Another issue might be not planning for medical or long-term care expenses. You didn't think about the fact that you'll have to pay for long-term care. You didn't think about Medicaid estate recovery. There also could be tax issues that you have to plan for. Most people at this point won't really have to worry about tax planning because the tax threshold is so high, but just in case, you might have that to consider. And then not hiring the right professionals. A lot of times people want to go with what's cheap or what's going to be convenient, and they're missing out on getting someone who can help them to create a plan that helps them to leave a legacy that they want to leave. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope that you enjoyed it and learned something. Make sure that you subscribe, like this video, share it with a friend, leave a comment. I would love to hear what you thought. And if you have any questions or anything else that you want to cover, let me know and I'll make sure to cover it in one of my upcoming videos. Again, this is Veronica McClendon, the family land lawyer, owner of McClendon Law and Consulting, the family land law firm. Take care.